Our final request comes from Matthew, who asked me to look at a lesser-known work from the creator of Tintin. It's the first 2 volumes for The Adventures of Joe, Zete, and Jocko, collectively called The Secret Ray. Joe, Zete, and Jocko wasn't something that Hergé came up with by himself. He was approached in 1935 by an editor of a French Catholic newspaper, who wanted him to write a new comic series about an ordinary family with children. Since that same paper was Hergé's only foothold in the French market, he reluctantly agreed to this request. He found a toy monkey in his home, called it Jocko, and got to work on the series' first story, which I'm reviewing here. Hergé eventually admitted that he disliked working on that series, which ended for good in 1957. He thought the characters there didn't have the same freedom to explore and discover like Tintin. So let's dive into The Secret Ray and see why he hated it so much. We begin with part 1, the Manitoba No Reply. The cover here has our 2 kid heroes and their pet chimp, Jocko, confronting some kind of robot that's already breaking stuff. And this scientist guy might be dead. Anyway, we open aboard the SS Manitoba, a passenger cruise ship where things are going smoothly, until the whole thing stops moving. The captain heads down to learn what's going on, but his colleagues also tell him that the ship's radios are dead. Help isn't coming anytime soon. This causes panic among all the passengers, especially this one old guy who wants to jump ship. But then all of a sudden, everybody starts to feel dizzy before falling unconscious. The only people who have an inkling about something going wrong are some radio guys in Liverpool. One guy says, "Nothing. The Manitoba no reply." Title drop! Look out! A giant question mark is about to land on the ship! Night passes and news spreads of the ship's disappearance. However, everyone on board finally wakes up and finds all their valuables stolen. Seems whatever did this only had one thing in mind: money! This is where we are finally introduced to our main trio playing on the beach. Little boy Joe, Sister Zete, and the aforementioned Jocko. Joe wants to prank his sister by luring her into a hole he dug. She indeed trips on the thing, but her bucket of water splashes onto her brother in response. Classic. Once the 2 go home, they learn about the Manitoba incident on the radio. The verdict so far is that the attack came from pirates, which inspires the kids to play pirates the next day, and on someone else's boat no less. So karma quickly bites them by sending a heavy fog to strand the 2 children. Maybe once that fog subsides, they will enter another universe and become the Tandy Computer Whiz Kids. Their parents obviously freak the hell out, but they only managed to find the empty boat. So where could those 2 be? Why, in a submarine, rescued by these 2 guys. One of them even gives our heroes hot coffee. Not sure if that was wise. We're inside a submarine. Isn't it funny, Zete? Inside a submarine. Yeah, here's where the art doesn't match the dialogue balloons. You certainly don't have much of an expression there, even though you sound excited about being inside a submarine. The man wearing the hawk sweater complains about having to harbor these kids, but the captain overrules him. Joe was about to write a letter to explain his whereabouts, but he, Zete, and Jocko soon fall asleep. Apparently, this was caused by the 2 submarine drivers, meaning that they might have something to do with the Manitoba incident. The kids awaken the next day to find themselves on the seabed. Seems the sub has really gone far down. Hawk comes in to give them food and... Yep, pitch black skin, large pouty lips. That's quite the design there. You can easily tell this was a comic strip from the 1930s, and the sort of viewpoints Hergé might have had with non-white people. But then again, what he thought about that topic is still an open-ended question. 1936 is around the same time as the release of The Blue Lotus. It's a Tintin story praised for its sensibilities against Chinese stereotypes, and it even criticized European and Japanese meddling inside of China. This change of heart is mostly due to a growing friendship between Hergé and Zhang Shongren, a Chinese artist studying in Belgium at the time. And not only did it lead to another masterpiece, the 1958 Tintin in Tibet, but it also contributed to Hergé's fascination with Taoism later in life. He and Zhang would remain close, lifelong friends. This is the main way that people understand the history of Hergé and Tintin, a neat division between the pre-Lotus works, which used racial stereotypes, and post-Lotus stories that don't. The Secret Ray is proof that such an understanding is a bit too simple, since it applied to those stereotypes even after Blue Lotus's release. And while there are no pouty lips and the like after the 1930s, as far as I know anyway, there's no correcting the record per se towards black characters. They just kinda faded from view. That's why I'm more interested in what Hergé later thought of Tintin in the Congo, which was the most shameless when it came to depicting the Congolese as backwards and immature. Did he recant all of that? Or did he still think that his home country of Belgium was justified in colonizing the Congo? Academics have debated the nature of Hergé's intentions and ideology for years, but I won't bore you with the details. It could be that he was more favorable towards certain non-white groups over others, which wouldn't be all that unusual. But for now, let's just leave it at, it's complicated. Anyway, after saying how he won't be taking the kids home, Hawk trips over Jocko. Hellfire! That lousy monkey tripped me up, you filthy beast! I'll wring your neck! For younger audiences, eh? Well then again, this could come down to a difference of taste between American and French audiences. He tries pulling a knife on them, but gets zapped by something caused by the cover page scientist. He's apparently the real boss around here, and he shoos Hawk away while telling the kids to shut up. While Joe and Zete fret for their lives, they notice that Jocko is missing. Turns out the monkey just snuck out while no one was looking, and he's just wandering around while thinking to himself, a la Garfield. Except the speech balloons aren't any different from everyone else's, so...
The animals are all going to talk, so you humans don't miss a thing.
Not sure why this is needed. Oh wait, I know why. So monkey shenanigans can occur, like Hawk slipping on one of his banana peels. Oh, and the seemingly nice captain slips and falls too. Even doing the Family Guy falling pose too. This gives Joe and Zete the chance to get out of the room. But only Joe goes, since his sister is too scared to leave. She gets taken to the scientist's room while we get some shots of Joe exploring this large underwater base. He peeks into another room to find some kind of underwater tank, but he has no time to venture further because the bad guys are onto him and Jocko. The monkey does his best to keep those guys at bay, and here's where you wish you were reading Tintin instead. These kids aren't exactly doing anything to put distance between themselves and their pursuers. They're only getting by due to sheer luck and accident. And if anything, it's Jocko who's carrying the trio. And imagine if these guys had guns. These kids would be dead in no time. At any rate, Joe gives the bad guys the slip by hiding in a room, but said room turned out to be where the scientist took Zete. The big bad then toys around with our hero by using his little device to levitate him across the room. He then leads his two captives into another room with that cover page robot, only it's blue instead of bronze. He says that he had to flee his country because he was a mad scientist. I mean, given his plan involves robots, I can see why. I should be able to more. Need more. I need an army of robots. With them, I shall be ruler of the world. I've seen scarier robots in Doctor Who. Besides, what's stopping anyone from tripping them over? The scientist then implies that he needs a human brain to give the robots the ability to control itself. But of course, Jocko hits a button that turns the robot on. The scientist then tries to stop Jocko with his levitation pen. But that only pushes the monkey back into the control panel, which causes the robot to freak out and break stuff. It stops stomping around once Jocko gets off the panel, but Zete wants to check on the big bad and see if he's hurt. Turns out he's fine. But then he throws a brick at Jocko and misses. The brick then hits the control panel and causes the robot to punch the scientist up into the ceiling. So everyone around the kids is an idiot. While Hergé needed to level the playing field if we're dealing with children, How he does this takes away any tension from the current situation. So now that the big bad hit his head, he's gone truly insane. This causes the pirates to convene and discuss what happens next. They'll still carry out robberies in the high seas, but an argument breaks out over what to do with the kids. Hawk wants to kill the two since they know too much, but another pirate, who I'll just call Ethical Pirate, speaks up and suggests just returning them home. Those two duke it out, and when Hawk wins, he quickly shoves the meddlers into a submersion chamber to drown them. But Ethical Pirate catches onto his plan, and he quickly makes his way over to the chamber to rescue the kids. By the way, in one of the panels, we see his former boss rambling about some science doohickey, but the speech balloon is being aimed at Ethical Pirate instead of him.
Great continuity!
Hawk sees what his colleague is up to, and they get into fisticuffs again. Seems like the only time any action is involved is when someone takes pity on the children. I actually thought that Joe and company would find a way to get out of this situation by themselves, like the Tandy Computer Whiz kids, but no. Hawk throws a wrench that inadvertently hits the scientist, thus returning him back to normal. This gives the Ethical Pirate the chance to knock out Hawk and save the children. Except now it looks like the scientist will just use them for his plans anyway, so way to go, dude. The other pirates then set out to plunder another ship, the SS Washington, but the kids help out by giving that ship an SOS to warn them of an attack. So when the pirates surface with their submarine, they find the Washington escorted by a warship. That doesn't deter the pirates though. They first activate the V-Ray, which stops everyone else's engines from running. Then they release their other trick, Sandman, which causes everyone to sleep. The ploy wasn't foolproof, since the sailors aboard the warship wore gas masks to protect themselves from the Sandman, but still they had to let the pirates go once they boarded the passenger ship. They don't want to fire on innocent civilians, so the bad guys win again. Just a little more patience, Zete. Even now they'll be arresting the pirates and coming to rescue us. Think so? No, you're all gonna die down here. But the last laugh is for the SS Washington, since its crew swapped out all the gold it had with iron. This tips off the pirates that there's a traitor in their midst, so the scientist checks a secret camera he installed to see who tipped off their target, and when he sees that the children were tampering with the radio, he orders his underlings to go capture them. This causes Joe, Zete, and Jocko to run back into the submersion chamber. They take control of one of the tanks and make their way out of the underwater base. Meanwhile, in New York, news of the second attack reached the bigwigs, and they're complaining non-stop about how the government isn't protecting them and their bottom lines. I guess some things never change. Back over to the main plot, the pirates give chase to the two children. The scientist even lets Hawk help out with this mission, and if he successfully returns the children to his base, his insubordination will be forgiven. The baddies get onto another underwater tank, but they have to make sure they don't go too deep into the water, since the maximum depth that these vehicles could go is 500 meters under sea level. The kids' tank then gets grabbed by a giant octopus, but during the commotion, Joe zaps it away with the tank's weapon. It's like a bigger version of the scientist's pen of levitation, so maybe this is a wave motion cannon? Regardless, before everyone can run out of air, Joe lands the tank onto this island. Good news, they're okay. Bad news, even more offensive caricatures of black people. In this case, we have cannibals who are trying to fatten up the children to, eat them at a later date. Suddenly it makes sense why this story didn't see an English release for so long. This story is so damn racist that I have to question what the hell Hergé was thinking. Luckily, Jocko was able to save the day, again, by attacking the natives with the help of the island's other monkeys. This allows Joe and Zete to run back to the tank and repel the attackers with the motion gun. This causes the natives to bow down to them, since obviously they think this gun is some sort of divine power. And part 1 ends with the kids being worshipped as sacred beings. All good, but they wonder what will happen to them while on this island. Well, so far the story has been rather mundane and pretty racist. I'm surprised no slurs have been brought up yet, but we have one more part to get through. Now the second half is titled The Eruption of Karamako. Appropriate given the cover art for this. Though how long will they actually spend on the island? Not very long, I bet. After a quick recap of the Manitoba no reply, we cut to the pirates looking for the kids. They track them to the island, and it's obvious that they're not going to take prisoners. But thankfully for our heroes, the natives ambush the pirates once they go inland. This lets Joe arm himself against more pirates if they come, but that won't matter because the volcano starts erupting. That was quick! Didn't go 5 minutes into this volume for this to happen. Joe is worried about the pirates, so he bails on Zete to go look for them. But they are somehow gone, and when he returns to where he last saw his sister, he finds her missing too. He then runs for his life when the lava starts flowing towards him. When he makes it to the water, Joe gets the attention of a flying news plane that's recording footage of the eruption. The pilots fly down to pick him up, but the boss uses the V-ray to sabotage the engine after overhearing their radio chatter. He then hears that a storm is brewing, so no need to go intercept the boy. He's letting the storm do his dirty work. We then cut over to Hawk and crew. Turns out they escaped the eruption with the underwater tank, and they have also captured Zete and Jocko. Why they didn't just kill them is a mystery to me, but when they resurface, they find the island completely barren. All that's left is this bunch of bananas, and it's certain that the natives all died from the eruption, and not a thought was spared towards said natives. Not even an ounce of sympathy. Yes, they did try to eat our heroes, but let me remind you that these are the same guys who helped them fight off the real bad guys. They also probably helped find food, water, and shelter for Joe and company to make their lives as comfortable as possible. Just wow! Hawk suggests rationing the bananas before eating the monkey, but Jocko runs away with the bananas in tow. This causes the baddies to threaten Zete's life, but the monkey comes back to throw rocks at the baddies until they go down. I swear, the chimp is the most powerful character in this story. In any event, the sub returns to pick up the pirates, who elect to just strand Zete and Jocko on the island. Joe is then taken to the US Navy, but the scientist screws them over by using the Sandman on everybody, and he only kidnaps Joe after all this. What the hell, villain? Now the sailors who you didn't kidnap will look for you and call for backup. Now, I was completely wrong about the scientist needing the brains of these kids. He's just going to electromagnetically transfer Joe's mind into the robot. It seems to work, as I think the robot is talking, but it's a false alarm. All the test did was charge up the robot without affecting Joe. Meanwhile, some film company reviews the news plane's eruption footage and sees the underwater tank on the island. They then tell the American government of this, which leads to a flight squadron flying to the island with the hope of recovering this technology. They come up with nothing at first, since Zete actually piloted the tank underwater with the hopes of getting to another island. But when she resurfaces, she spots the plane that could have been there to rescue her. So to get their attention, she fires the gun towards those planes, which leads to the pilots bombing her back in response. And now she might be dead. I've only seen that one live-action Tintin movie, and maybe a clip or two of the animated adaptations, but those had better humor and drama than this comic ever does. Turns out Zete just fainted, because bombing children for real is a no-go zone, even for French audiences. The pilots then get help in towing the underwater tank back for further studies. There is a minor mishap when the tow breaks, but that gets resolved rather quickly. Whatever, everyone arrives at New York City. There, Zete gets pestered by journalists asking irrelevant questions like, "What's your favorite ice cream? What did you think of the president's speech?" and the like. Guess that's in reference to how the media doesn't focus on the more pressing issues, which is probably the one bit of social commentary that still holds water. She then gets taken to a radio station to tell the world what she went through. But some gangsters swoop in to kidnap her because she was getting reward money in relation to the ship incidents. Yeah, that's the defining trait of these kid characters. They keep getting kidnapped. They're pretty generic, and yet everyone wants them, because they got caught up in a mad scientist's evil scheme. This then leads to a subplot where Zete needs to be rescued by gangsters. Joe is basically sidelined for this entire sequence. And seriously, this isn't exactly entertaining. If the point of the series was to relate to the children, giving them kid characters who can't really fend for themselves isn't the way to go about it. Very rarely do they ever do anything on their own, and usually they only go as far as they do because of dumb luck. I'm skipping ahead a bit, but let's just say through monkey hijinks, Jocko was able to save Zete and capture the gangsters. Her parents finally get off their asses and reunite with their daughter. So now they only need to rescue Joe, which hasn't really been hurt after all this time. The father then gets mistaken for the famous Professor Legrand, but this gives him an opportunity to study the underwater tank his daughter collected, and as he does, the scientist boss calls through the vehicle radio with a warning. If he continues to poke around the craft, Joe's life is forfeit. Joe is told to press this message, but he tells his father the exact opposite. I guess Joe doesn't mind if he dies, even though kids his age will probably not behave like him in this situation. But this gives his father an idea. He coordinates with the police and whatnot to set up some schmuck bait for the pirates. A ship that reportedly has all sorts of precious cargo that the pirates want. So of course, the baddies fall for it, and when their submarine returns to base, it opens up to show all the good guys coming out in force. Now the pirates are on the defensive. The scientist then tries to drag Joe into a room where he will activate the base's self-destruct button. But Joe trips him to escape. This leaves the big bad no other choice but to blow up his whole headquarters. Well, actually there's no self-destruct, but he smashes an outer window with a sledgehammer to achieve the same effect. He dies right after the water rushes in, I presume, and everybody else has to find a way out before they drown too. Thankfully, Joe remembers that the doctor has an escape hatch for such a situation, so he takes his father and some Navy guys to that room. They close the hatch and unscrew it so they can escape to the surface. They get picked up by the Navy, and finally, the danger is over. Upon returning, there is one last radio broadcast for Joe and his family, with one last racist caricature thrown in for good measure. Jocko even gets the chance to grab the mic and communicate with the other chimps stuck in the city zoo. And so, our comic ends with our heroes returning home via cruise ship, where they'll be happy to be away from the adventuring, until the next story, that is. Yeah, this wasn't a very good story. And while I'm not the target demographic for this comic, I don't really see kids enjoying this either. Honestly, I pin the failure of this series not just on Hergé, but on the newspaper editors who asked him for it. It's one thing to empower kids, but there's nothing memorable about Joe and Zete as characters. They just blunder through everything, and they would have died 10 times over if not for the hardest plot armor I've seen in years. Part of what made Tintin so memorable was his determination to unravel every mystery he comes across, even when there were setbacks. That sort of proactivity is something the kids can cheer on, regardless of the character's age. Any worthwhile material in The Secret Ray was probably better off in a Tintin story, like those few social commentary bits it had. And the less said about the racist caricatures, the better. Even without them, this story just wasn't a good read. It's mundane at best and somewhat irritating at worst. You're better off reading Tintin, or any Tintin media, from the comics, the cartoons, and the movie adaptations. I'm the Media Hunter. Media's my prey, and reviewing them my way.